So we're speaking to Freeman Young, who is a California resident, and Freeman is a Bigfoot researcher. And hello, Freeman, how you doing?
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you and I have talked a little bit in the past, and I wanted just to kind of maybe give the audience some quick background on the kind of research you're doing. So you live in California, near San Francisco, is that correct?
That's right. I live in the Bay Area. I live in the East Bay, and I've been kind of hopping back and forth from the East Bay to the North Bay in Marin and Contra Costa County, Alameda County, back and forth.
And currently you are doing research in that area. You have actually seen Bigfoot, or tell us more about what you've discovered.
Yeah, there. Well, let's see. This I've lived here most. I was born in LA, but I was raised in the Bay Area, and my encounters with Bigfoot started in the 7th, 8th grade summer, right in between 7th and 8th grade in Vado, which is in the North Bay in Marin. And since then to now, through the years, that's about 30-something years, they've always been around, they're always over there, whatever, and then in the last 5 years I noticed that they were in the neighborhoods near the open space at night.
Oh, really?
And so, yeah, it kind of blew my circuits at first when I heard what we were conditioned to hear out in the wilderness, right in the neighborhoods. And so I started, that really got me going. And so for the past 5 years, that's what I've been doing. I've been following Bigfoot around in suburbia and even in the urban industrial areas.
Now, we've written and talked about on Facebook this concept of backyard Bigfoots. Are usually in rural areas. And we've got a site down in Texas we're doing some research at. But you're saying, now how close to the city are they? Or tell us more about what you've noticed in terms of them arriving through neighborhoods.
Well, you know, there's adjacent open spaces, right? There's that's what they call it here in California, is open space. Designated. It's not ranch land. Well, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's in a land trust, but mostly it's just open space.
Okay, sure.
Nobody can build on it. No one can develop it. It just stays the way it was. And it may or may not have trails through it. It might be protected. It may not be protected. Protected watershed. These are the areas that are where the Squatch hang out, because people don't go there really. And if they do go there, just to the trails. And there's tons of poison oak, tons of sticker bushes, tons of natural barriers to people. Now, what I discovered is that if you get beyond the natural barrier, you start to find Bigfoot highways, little pathways that are, my goodness, this has been used a lot, you know, and you start finding Squatch sign, and then pretty soon, all of a sudden you're having Class Bs. They're knocking around, they're breaking branches, and then, you know, if you stay with it, eventually, you know, they'll show themselves.
So what got you interested in this research? Did you have a sighting when you were younger, or?
Yes, well, you know, when I was a kid and it happened, I wanted to know what the heck made that scream up there, you know? And some of the other kids had seen and reported the glowing eyes, you know, and I hadn't seen the glowing eyes yet, you know, and so I was like, glowing eyes, nah, you know, and plus I was up in the woods all the time playing, and I hadn't really, you know, I'd seen the Patterson Gremlin film, but that was up north, you know, and so I just never ever thought about it in context of, you know, Sasquatch being the culprit, you know, but something was the culprit. So I went out late at night, you know, and there was one year when there was a drought in the late 80s out here, like a 3-year drought. During that time, everything had to come out of the woods to drink in people's backyards and in the golf course, you know, wherever there was water, right? So there was a golf course near where I lived, and it was in the kind of in the open space, in the really rich people's houses, and it was kind of, you know, spread out, kind of nice area. And then I had a friend who lived there, and he called me, he said, dude, I heard it, 1:30 in the morning, screaming. So the next day I was out there, next night, I mean, midnight, with my little micro cassette recorder, trying to get in position, you know, and the Sasquatch, it was an adolescent one. It jumped, like from above the road above me had this long wall, like a retaining wall, and it was up there was woods. Well, it jumped off that retaining wall, must have been 16 feet high, landed right in the street, right in front of me, on all fours, on its fingertips, and it was, in my mind, a baboon, right? Instantly, because when I saw it, it turned, it looked at me and went, Wah! And then it jumped into the tree. There was an oak tree on the par 5. This was the top of a par 5 right here where they tee off. And he jumped out of the tree and down that par 5 in the full moonlight. I saw it the whole way, and that moment that it went, Rah! I looked it right in the eye, and it was a baboon. That's what I saw.
Yeah.
You know, given the moonlight in my mind and what I had for context at the time. And it was screaming, so it had its mouth open, so I didn't really, you know, I didn't see human-like features. I saw primate features. And so I had it. That was a baboon. You know, rich people can buy whatever they want. People down the street have an ocelot. Those people over there have monkeys. Case closed, right?
Yeah.
Baboons got away.
Your friend seemed to think he knew it was something different than a baboon, right? Or
no,
no
one knew what it was for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Just it was the screamer, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, it would come down because it needed to drink, and it would sound off before it would do that, you know, for some reason. And then I noticed that it kept coming, like every summer. It'd be around for a month or two. I'd hear it screaming. Maybe it was over in the distance. Maybe it was a mile away. You there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. And so I kept on, you know, I kind of lost interest. Became a teenager, you know, and then, you know, we'd go up, and in those days we would go up and experimenting with psychedelics and whatever we were doing as young people then, and they'd show up again, you know, but I always had it that it was either a fox or a baboon or it was something explainable. It was never Bigfoot, because we're adolescents. They weren't the big giant. They were the same size as me, kind of, you know. So those were all my ways of convincing myself it wasn't Bigfoot. But I used to find ripped open deers with the guts strewn around, and like think to myself, like, who the heck would do this, you know? And once I came into a place where they had been, and there was a little camp with like little pads where they had been sitting, and it was well worn, you know, and it's way out there in the woods, you know, and it was like one of their little camps, you know. And there was footprints, all different sizes, going in all directions. And that was the thing that was confusing to me. It was like I didn't quite connect the dots.
Right.
Even though I saw the footprints, I just thought it must be, who are these people, you know? And that was my answer. So for the next until all the way up until like 2000, that was kind of my you know, I convinced myself that was the truth.
So what changed it over time, or what got you thinking, okay, this is actually things?
Well, I went to this. I was up in Klamath National Forest. I had a friend who lived in Scott Valley, and so I went to his place to visit him, and I went on a mountain bike ride, and that's in the Klamath National Forest. And so I took a shortcut, put the mountain bike on my shoulder, and started hiking up a steep a hill to cut, you know, like a mile off of my ride on a switchback. I just went straight up.
That makes sense.
And I got about 2/3 of the way up, and then there was like a, I don't know, woodpecker's hole, like right at eye level. So I started looking at it, and then right behind me, maybe 10 yards away, I hear this of the ripping of like something powerful ripping apart wood, like just ripping the wood. Like I can't even do the sound, but it was something powerful tearing wood.
Okay.
And it gave me the, you know, it spooked me. I turn around and look, and I see this black hairy thing sticking up out of this log, and it's got its head in the log, and it hasn't noticed me. And I think, bear, it's a bear. Oh my God, it's a bear. I'm like, take the bike and put the bike like I'm going to defend myself with the bike, you know. And then it stands up, and it's a Bigfoot, and I'm like, holy shit, you know. And now I'm like, it puts its head back in the log. It didn't even notice me. So then I, as quietly as I could, bolted down the hill, jumped on my bike, and boogied back to camp. Noticeably shaken when I got back. I was just like, oh my God, you know. And that's when it began. I started going, okay. And I went on the internet, and then I saw everything was going on. I discovered the BFRO, and then I saw that they had expeditions. You could just, so I paid my, whatever it was, $200 or something, and went out on one of Matt's things, you know?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I was like, what the heck is this? You know, I couldn't even believe it, really, you know? They had all this equipment and stuff, and it just didn't seem like if you're going to approach the master of stealth, boss of the woods, you can't do it with SUVs packed with people driving around in the wilderness areas, jumping out and banging on things.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just no way to go about trying to, you know, prove they exist anyway, you know? Anyway, that was my take on it.
So now
and so I thought, well, how hard can it be, right? How hard can it be?
Yeah.
So then that's when I started.
And
I went on two. Okay. I went on 2 expeditions, and that was it. That was all I needed to do. And I appreciate what they do, the BFRO and stuff, you know. Although I don't really think that their methods are very fruitful, really. I mean, they had that great year in 2000 when they got the Skookum print and stuff, but they really don't have any, for all of their efforts, much solid evidence that's, you know, they got prints and they got, you know, this and that, but they don't really have any good photos or anything. You know?
It's all after the fact.
A few, but for all the efforts, they should have more. Anyway, that's where I thought, God, I could do this, you know? And so I just kind of had it in my head. I did the expeditions, and so I went out and I was practicing for when I would go out into the wilderness areas and where Bigfoot really was. And then I'm out in my open space near my house, and I'm banging around just practicing, because you know, you can't just hit any tree to make a tree knock. You got to find the right tree. You got to have the right piece of wood. There's a lot to it. It's just, you know. So I'm practicing, right? And as I'm practicing, all of a sudden I'm getting responses. I'm like, no way. This is like daytime, you know?
Now, where were you?
And I'm like, well, I was in the open space in Marin County, next to, like, surrounded by houses. It was an open space that's surrounded, completely encircled by houses and freeways and the bay on one side and everything.
Okay.
But it's also enough acreage where they can hang out and avoid humans and you know, live. And they do, right? And so I started to interact with those, you know, and habituate and play hide and seek, and, you know, and it was a daily thing. Every day, I was out there every day. And, you know, people really think I'm nuts, you know, for, you know, the way that I've become so passionate about it, you know, they're in our neighborhoods, you know?
Yeah, makes people think, okay, weird, strange.
Right, whatever, dude, you know?
What have you noticed recently, or have you had more sightings as a result of your own expeditions?
Oh, yeah, well, see, this is what happened after after a while of maybe, I don't know, a few months of every day being out there playing hide and seek, they get used to you. And, you know, I'd leave them offerings, you know, I'd buy things, or I'd get free, you know, from the homeless shelters or stuff, I'd get free throwaway food and stuff, and I'd make offerings. Sometimes, and first they wouldn't take my offerings for a long time. They just let them sit there, you know? And then suddenly, just like that, they started taking them. So after a long time of not touching them, they started taking them, and then after that, they started to sort of, like, I moved across to the East Bay in the middle of that kind of summer. Then whenever I would come back over to Marin, they were like waiting for me. As soon as I got the car pulled up and stopped, crack, right outside in the woods, right outside where I was parked. You know, like 25 yards away in the woods, you know, like,
was that a warning kind of crack, or they're just saying they're just acknowledging your presence?
They've been waiting for me, or they knew I was coming, or I don't know how they knew, you know?
Yeah.
But it was like habituation. It was a real habituation. They, you know, and so they would eventually, it just give me the peek behind the tree, let me see their face, go back behind the tree. Peek, you know, from up above the log, let you see the top of their head and just their eyes and nose, and then disappear. You know, that's about as much as you'd see. Or you'd see them, the back side of them as they were disappearing into the woods. Maybe they'd give you a look over their shoulder. That's about it. You know, but it was mostly that. And then I moved to the East Bay, and I noticed they were in the East Bay too. So then in the East Bay, I started doing the same thing, going out every day, every morning. I'd get up really early in the morning, like 4 in the morning, and I'd go out and I'd listen. to the neighborhood, and I'd hear them in the neighborhood. Now, that neighborhood had no street lights. It was one of the ones that they developed right after World War II. It was like one of the first track home type of developments.
Okay, sure.
Before suburbia really took off, right? It was an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
It's called The Leftovers. So it's really out there, and it's bumped up and surrounded by open space on all sides. Like, it's no trespassing, and it's overgrown, and there's no trails. There's only certain pathways from the one road to the very top. Now, at the top is Wildcat Canyon, Tilden Park, and it's, very well managed area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even has cattle up there, and there used to be Nike missile sites, so there's a paved road. Now there's people that are up there every day on top, but there's no one, and there's people on the road in the bottom because it's like a highway, but there's nothing in between. It's just woods, and nobody goes in there. They're in there. I went in there, and I just kept going in there, and then during the ticks and the poison oak and the sticker bushes and everything, and they got used to me. Again, at first they're really intimidated, and they're really, scary, and then they get used to it, and then they stop being that way.
Let's talk about that. Do you ever feel like you're afraid, or you ever feel threatened, or?
Well, we have an overblown reaction to fight or flight, right? Mm-hmm. Anything, we just overreact. And so that's really my drug, is that if I can stand in the place of my fear when it hits, because it hits. If you're alone in the woods at night, I'm sorry. Yeah. And they start smashing around over there, it's going to scare you. If you're not scared, something's wrong with you. But it's how you handle your fear. And that's the thing that becomes the skill to master is, how you manage your fear when it hits like that. Are you going to run? Are you going to hide? Are you going to, what can you do, right? So what I do is I just breathe and open and try to focus on love and light and open, and just try not to go into the fear place. As hard as I'm feeling it, try to rewrite the program. Yep. And if I can do it for 10 seconds, the first 10 seconds, I win. And now suddenly the Bigfoot's scared. All of a sudden they stop right in their tracks, and they're like, what? Huh? And then they get all skittish. Right? So would you recommend I call it fear ball. Fear ball. They throw the fear at me, and then if I don't, you throw it back at them. If I don't run, then I throw it back. Yeah.
Do you recommend people? Let's say they hear something to walk towards it, then, or just
no? I don't walk towards it. I just stand my ground.
Stand your ground.
And I just breathe. And if it's dark, like say it's 4:30 in the morning, and
well, before we go, give us some tips or advice to others who, and maybe people in your area that want to do their own research. Give us more advice on what you've done, what you find helpful, and what not to do.
Well, what I would, if I was, someone who's curious and skeptical, just go outside and listen. Just go out in the middle of the night and don't do anything. Just listen. Just listen and listen and listen until you hear them. If you don't hear them, then try imitating them, like do a couple of knocks and wait. Don't get overblown, because if you really want to get curious about you and not think that you're me, yeah, really, then you got to be cautious about how you approach them, because they are like top of the food chain. One thing you got to remember is that they are top of the food chain, even though they don't tend to hurt humans, or you definitely have to respect them, because they are powerful beings, and you don't want to piss them off, That's one thing for sure. So don't go crashing into if you think they're in the poison oak or the blackberries or whatever, and you got a camera and you want to grab your sidearm and camera and go crashing into the bushes. That's not a great idea. You're going to not shoot what you want to shoot, and you're just going to scare them away.
Very good. We're listening to Freeman Young, who is a Bigfoot researcher in California, so maybe we'll have you on again and get more tips.